Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with classical music's most powerful, quiet climaxes. Oh my goodness, this one is remarkable. And it's actually very interesting because some of you mentioned the work, but not this part of it. We're talking about Sirènes from Debussy's Nocturnes. What an amazing piece for orchestra and wordless female choir. The interesting thing to me was that several of you mentioned Nuage, the first in this particular triptych. Nuage is certainly very quiet. Absolutely, it just sort of drifts around. But the fact of the matter is, Nuage is not a climax. There's nothing climactic about it. It's a prelude. It's a prelude to Fête, if anything. You know, the second movement. There's no tension in Nuage. It's clouds drifting across the sky. Debussy's not trying to create something climactic. Heavens, no. But a bunch of you did mention it, probably because it's largely quiet. So is Sirènes. But the interesting thing is that we don't hear Sirènes that way. It's a piece of tremendous power and tension. Why? Well, first of all, the subject matter. The sirens were beings of supernatural power, right? I mean, that was the whole concept in ancient Greek mythology. You know, they lured men to their deaths. And so, yeah, I mean, there's that wonderful, story behind the actual piece. But more than that, there is an aesthetic fact which creates so much climactic tension in this last triptych. It's very interesting. The Nocturnes were frequently performed just the orchestral bits because people didn't want to go through the expense of having a wordless choir there, learning the music. It's not easy to perform, not at all. And so there are a lot of recordings of just the first two, which I think is cowardice. I think that should never be allowed to happen, ever, never in a billion years. But anyway, Tovey pointed it out. This piece was really radical when it was first written. And Tovey said that he had never had the opportunity to perform a work with a wordless choir to see what happens when our expectation of words, of verbal meaning, is defeated. That's where the tension in this piece comes from. He pointed out, Tovey did, and he's absolutely right. We are hardwired when we hear the human voice to expect meaning in the form of words. How aggravating is it for all of us when we listen to operatic voices and we can understand a word of what they're singing about, even when they're supposed to be doing it in English? I remember so vividly seeing, dialogues of the Carmelites by Poulenc. Poulenc insisted that it be performed in the language of the country in which it was being played. And nobody took more pains over word selection and musical word setting than Poulenc did. He wanted every syllable to be clear. But when they did it at the Met, they did it in English. And it was fabulous because they were all singing in English, and most of them were American singers, and I couldn't understand a damn word that they were singing about, except for Régine Crespin as the old prioress, who sang with a French accent. You could hear her accent. You could understand every word that she said. That, of course, her husband was a linguist, which may have helped. But it just goes to show that when you hear voices, you hear words, and not understanding what they're saying is really annoying. So in the case of Sirènes, we're not supposed to understand any words because there aren't any, but we hear the voices. And those voices have incredible allure. They are sirens in the very best sense of the term. And so this is truly a quiet climax because it creates that tension, that magnetic draw towards the source of the voices and the desire to have whatever they're doing clarified for us in the form of an actual text. And because Debussy doesn't give us the text, we feel a certain pressure. Really an amazing piece. So here's a bit of it. I've got a minute and a bit of it just so you get a sense. People don't pay much attention to this piece. and don't realize just how extraordinary it really is. We've got the Orchestre National de Lyon under Ewan Merkel on Naxos. Give this a listen and you'll hear exactly what I mean. Amazing, isn't it? I mean, it does have a couple swells up to a louder volume, but basically the whole piece is quiet, mysterious, compelling, and powerful. Really is. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.